In the days before they died, the family heard footsteps. Not outside, not downstairs, in the attic, right above their heads. The father searched. He found nothing. But he did find something else. Footprints in the snow, leading from the forest to the farmhouse. And there were no footprints leading back. Someone had walked to the farm and never left. On the night of March 31st, 1922, every person inside that farmhouse was murdered. 6 people, 1 weapon. And then, the killer stayed. He fed the animals. He ate the family's food. He slept in their beds. For 3 days he lived among the dead. This is the Hinterkaifeck murders. And after more than 100 years, no one knows who did it. Hinterkaifeck was a small, isolated farmstead located about 70 kilometers north of Munich in rural Bavaria. It sat between the towns of Weidhofen and Gruber, surrounded by dense forest with no neighbors in sight. The farm was home to the Gruber family. Andreas Gruber, 63, the patriarch. His wife, Cäzilia, 72. Their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35. And Victoria's 2 children, 7-year-old Cäzilia and 2-year-old Joseph. The family was not well liked in the community. Andreas was known as a difficult, controlling man. In 1915, he had been convicted of incest with his daughter Victoria, a scandal that still hung over the family 7 years later. Many believed young Joseph was Andreas's son. The family lived in near total isolation, shunned by their neighbors. But isolation works both ways. No one could see what happened inside that farm, and no one could see who was watching from the trees. In the weeks before the murders, strange things began happening at Hinterkaifeck. The family's previous maid, Cäzilia, had quit 6 months earlier. She told people the farm was haunted. She'd heard footsteps in the attic at night, heavy, deliberate footsteps, and no one could explain them. Then, just days before the killings, Andreas made a discovery that should have changed everything. He found tracks in the fresh snow. They led from the edge of the forest directly to the farmhouse, specifically to a door with a broken lock that led to the machine room. But there were no tracks leading back. Whoever had come to the farm was still there. Andreas told his neighbors about the footprints. They offered to help. He refused. That same night, the family heard footsteps in the attic again. Andreas searched but found no one. He also found a strange newspaper from Munich that no one in the family had purchased. Someone was living in their house. Someone was watching them. And Andreas Gruber did nothing about it. On the afternoon of Friday, March 31st, 1922, a new maid arrived at Hinterkaifeck. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old, and this was her first day. Maria's sister had walked her to the farm that afternoon and stayed for a brief visit before leaving. She was likely the last person to see any of the inhabitants alive. Maria had no connection to the family's dark history. She was simply a woman who needed work. She had no way of knowing that by accepting this job, she had walked into the last hours of her life. What happened that night has been reconstructed from the physical evidence. Late on the evening of March 31st, someone lured the family members to the barn, one by one. It's believed that Victoria was called out first, then her daughter, little Cäzilia, then the grandparents, Andreas and his wife. One after another, they walked through the stable and into the barn. And one after another, they were struck down with a mattock, a heavy farming tool, half pickaxe, half hoe. The blows were to the head. They were brutal. They were efficient. 4 bodies were found stacked in the barn, covered with hay. The killer had taken the time to arrange them. Then the killer walked back into the house. 2-year-old Joseph was asleep in his bassinet in the bedroom. He was killed where he lay. Maria Baumgartner, the maid who had arrived just hours earlier, was murdered in her bedchamber. She had been at Hinterkaifeck for less than 1 day. This is where the case crosses from horrifying into something almost incomprehensible. After killing 6 people, including a toddler and a 7-year-old girl, the murderer did not flee. He stayed. For 3 days, the killer remained at the farm. He fed the cattle. He ate the family's food. The entire supply of bread was consumed. He cut meat from the pantry. He used the fireplace for warmth. He moved freely through the house, stepping over and around the bodies. The farm appeared to function normally from the outside. Smoke rose from the chimney. The animals were cared for. No one came to check on the family because no one had reason to believe anything was wrong. For 3 days, a killer lived among 6 corpses. And then, he simply disappeared. It wasn't until Tuesday, April 4th, 4 days after the murders, that anyone grew suspicious. Young Cäzilia hadn't shown up for school. The postman noticed that Saturday's mail was still in the box. Neighbors hadn't seen any activity at the farm. A group of concerned villagers finally walked to Hinterkaifeck. What they found would haunt the community forever. In the barn, stacked under straw, lay the bodies of Andreas, his wife Victoria, and little Cäzilia. Inside the house, they found Joseph still in his bassinet and Maria in her bed. The scene was grotesque, but also eerily preserved. The fire had recently been used. The animals were alive and recently fed. It was as if someone had been maintaining the household right up until the moment the bodies were discovered. Of all the details in this case, one stands above the rest in its horror. The autopsy revealed that 7-year-old Cäzilia Gabriel did not die immediately. While the others were killed by the initial blows, little Cäzilia survived the attack. She was alive for hours afterward, lying in the straw of the barn, in the dark, among the bodies of her family. Investigators found that she had torn out her own hair in tufts. Whether from pain, from terror, or from the simple, desperate need to do something. A 7-year-old girl lay dying alone in the darkness for hours, and the killer, who remained at the farm for 3 more days, apparently did nothing. He let her suffer. He let her die. And then he fed the animals. An investigative team from Munich, led by Inspector Georg Gruber, was assigned to the case. But from the beginning, the investigation was compromised. Before police arrived, curious onlookers had swarmed the crime scene. They moved the bodies. They touched potential evidence. Some had even cooked meals in the kitchen. The crime scene was thoroughly contaminated. Despite this, investigators determined key facts. A mattock was the murder weapon, though it wasn't initially found at the scene. Robbery was initially suspected, then ruled out. A large amount of money was found undisturbed in the house. The skulls of all 6 victims were removed and sent to Munich for examination by a clairvoyant, a sign of just how desperate investigators had become. The case would continue for decades. Police made repeated arrests. Over 100 suspects were questioned, but no one was ever convicted. 2 men drew the most suspicion. The first was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor and former lover of Victoria. Schlittenbauer was believed to be the biological father of young Joseph. He had a complicated hostile relationship with Andreas Gruber. Suspiciously, Schlittenbauer was one of the first people to enter the farm after the bodies were discovered, and witnesses noted that he went directly to the barn as if he already knew where to look. Despite years of suspicion, he was never charged. The second major suspect was Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, officially killed in action during World War I, but his body was never recovered. After the war, released prisoners of war from the region claimed that a German-speaking Soviet officer had told them he was the Hinterkaifeck murderer. Some theorized this officer was Karl Gabriel, returned from the dead to take revenge on the family, but the claims were never verified. Less than a year after the murders, the Hinterkaifeck farmstead was demolished. The community wanted the physical reminder of the violence erased forever. But during the demolition, workers made a chilling discovery. A second mattock, covered in dried blood, hidden in the attic, the very place where the family had heard those footsteps. A penknife was also found in the hay in the barn. These crucial pieces of evidence had been missed during the original investigation. The case was officially closed in 1955. The last interrogations took place in 1986, when Detective Chief Superintendent Conrad Müller-Thumann conducted final interviews before his retirement. After that, the file went cold. Today, a small concrete memorial stands near where the farm once stood. It's called the Hinterkaifeck Andachtsstätte, a place of quiet remembrance in a field where 6 people were slaughtered over a century ago. More than 100 years later, the questions remain. Who was living in the attic? Why did the killer stay for 3 days after the murders? Why didn't Andreas call the police when he found the footprints? Was this revenge? Was it madness? Was it someone the family knew, or a stranger who watched them from the forest? The footprints led to the farm. There were none leading away. Whoever killed the Gruber family may have been inside the house for days before the murders, eating their food, breathing their air, listening to their conversations, waiting. And when it was done, he stayed a little longer. He fed the animals. He kept the fire going, as if he wasn't quite ready to leave, as if for those 3 days, the farm was his. 6 lives were taken on a quiet farm in Bavaria, a 63-year-old man, his 72-year-old wife, their 35-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old girl who survived long enough to tear out her own hair, a 2-year-old boy who never woke up, and a 44-year-old woman on her very first day of work. If you know something, if a story was passed down in your family, or if a name was whispered in a Bavarian village, the truth still matters, even after 100 years. This has been Cold Vault. Subscribe for more unsolved cases.